Hello and welcome to Differential Discussions. I'm Melissa.
I'm Dave.
And today we're going to look at a myelodysplastic syndrome.
MDS.
Getting into what you all have been waiting for. Interesting white cells.
Yeah, I'm sure there's definitely some of you out there that are like, stop talking about ovalocytes.
Yeah, we've had one comment that said, where's the leukemias?
So yeah, we're at a leukemia adjacent disorder at the very least, right? So yeah, and this is seemed like a fitting field
Beautiful
to kind of start on.
Yeah.
We have what appears to be an abnormal blast present here.
Yep.
And then I'm kind of looking around, some platelets, not a ton.
Yep.
And then some abnormal red cell morphology. But you know, yeah.
Yeah. So it looks like, let me just play with that. Okay, cool. So first let's talk about the blasts, I guess, right? Yeah. We haven't talked too much about blasts other than our neutrophil maturation.
So what speaks to you when you look at this cell?
The nucleus takes up the majority of the cell.
Yeah. And
the cell is large. Like you could probably fit all four of these red cells that are near it into that cell because it's nice and large. In the nucleus, you can see that it's nice and relatively evenly stained, except for the nucleoli. Those kind of hole punchy areas. So you can see you've got one here. You've actually got a small one here. Mm-hmm. Small one here. Mm-hmm. And it looks like another small one here.
Yep. So, I always try to tell people, watch out for the nucleoli, because they're kind of like they telling you like, look at me.
Yeah. And I'll just clear it so then they can kind of see. Yeah. It literally looks like a depression or like a hole punch in the nucleus. And remember, those are the areas where the DNA is unwound and you're going through replication, making the mRNA, processing the mRNA, and then sending it out of the nucleus.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that, and then of course the basophilia.
Yes. So the color of the cytoplasm here, right? Blue.
Yep.
So, you know, other cells that have a nucleus that takes up the majority of the volume, and blue cytoplasm. So we're thinking of lymphocytes, right?
Reactive lymphocytes.
Yeah. Right. Yes. So perhaps someone might make the error with a reactive lymphocyte. Of course, a mature resting lymph is going to have a very, very clumped nuclear chromatin pattern, much different in contrast to this one, which is, you know, I would say like looser.
Yep. Fluffy, velvety.
Yep. Lots of different ways to describe this that hit people's minds differently. So I don't think there's a one size fits all. Yeah. But I like loose, velvety kind of chromatin pattern.
And if you're wondering, like, what is velvet? Like, what does that kind of like feel like? Just think of those like 90s velour running suits and then think about touching those. That's kind of like the velvety feeling I always imagine the nucleus has.
Right. Yeah. So, of course, these are microscopic elements. We don't have the luxury of the touch, but something about that speaks to the mind's eye. And so when you hear us use a term like that, that's what we're referring to. Yeah. But yeah, this cell is far too large and
it's very large. I think that's the other thing is when people first start looking at blasts, they think, oh, well, it could be a lymph. But the small resting lymphs, remember the nucleus is about the same size as the red cells around them. Mm-hmm. So look at how big these are compared. This guy is compared to the red cells. So it's much bigger than a small round resting lymph. Mm-hmm. To me, which would mean it would be a large spready lymph. But then if it's a large spready lymph, the chromatin doesn't usually look like this. There's not usually this many prominent nucleoli. Right. And then maybe a reactive. But again, reactive lymphs are much clumpier. And the cytoplasm, the blue, that kind of coloration is a different, like almost like a darker color blue, and it radiates. This one doesn't really radiate. It's just kind of darker at the edges and then a little bit lighter inside. So it's slightly different.
The other thing I tend to look for too, it's not like a guarantee, is the nucleoli shape itself can sometimes be a bit telling. So normal cells, like a lymphocyte that's been activated, you get this reactive picture, could have nucleoli. They're typically round and oval. They keep a normalish kind of shape. The nucleoli in the corner of this one is like a half moon or something, like that's an abnormal shape. Also thinking about abnormal numbers.
Yeah.
1 or 2 nucleoli in normal cells, you get up to 3, 4 nucleoli, big red flag. That is malignant cell.
Yep. Awesome.
Cool. So yeah, blasts in the peripheral blood can be in the MDS picture.
Yep.
Really, the presentation in the peripheral blood can be very, very different from one patient to the next. So we'll see what we find as we kind of look around, I guess.
Yeah, and an MDS is going to be defined by the bone marrow picture more so, and the cytogenetics, and less the peripheral blood picture. So we don't know which MDS this one is, but we're going to venture around the peripheral blood smear anyway and see. And one of the things that we're looking for is dysplasia, those dysplastic features. Now, dysplasia in the peripheral blood is far less common. It's really easy to pick out in the bone marrow. But in the peripheral blood, the way it mostly manifests is nuclear cytoplasmic asynchrony, where the nucleus and the cytoplasm are maturing at different rates. So that's one thing we'll look for. The other thing that we'll look for that you can commonly see in the peripheral blood of MDS patients is abnormal cytoplasmic staining. So your more mature cells may hold on to the basophilia, whereas, it's usually the blast in the promyelocytic stage that hold on to the basophilia, and after that it loses the basophilia. You can see the more mature cells having these weird staining features in the peripheral blood. So that's for white cells. For reds, one of the things that's common, and we talk about a dimorphic population fairly frequently with diseases, but usually the dimorphic population is, your normochromic normocytic with either macro or micro. Usually that's a dimorphic population, 2 major populations. That's not usually micro and macro together. Although when you're looking at MDS, it could be both together, or could be all 3 together. So we can really see a lot of anisocytosis, or that variation in size, when we're looking at MDS. And so you're already seeing that here, where you're seeing that you have cells like this guy here, which is probably actually normal, but he looks huge in comparison to some of these little guys here. But then you have something like this guy, which is significantly larger than even that one. So you can see that fairly commonly in MDS. So we'll look around and see if we can see more signs of that as we move.
Yeah, I just kind of, dysplasia, I just kind of look at as frame in my mind is it's just messed up development, right? And this is a normal neutrophil. It's hanging out.
And too, one of the things that's common in neutrophils with dysplasia would be the abnormal nucleus. So the nucleus may be like a giant ring, not have true segments, those kinds of things. But yeah, this one just looks like a normal neutrophil.
The ring is pretty cool. Yeah, you see that from time to time. So likely a mono?
Yeah.
But so it still is spooky. I mean,
it's weird looking.
Yeah, it's weird looking. The little purple bleb in the middle of this cell, bizarre. I think it may be part of the nucleus, but it may not. And monos don't usually segment like this. So this is a weird cell.
It is. It's very weird. And the cytoplasm looks mono-y, right? It looks like a mono. The nucleus, I'm wondering if this has some of that nuclear to cytoplasmic asynchrony, where the nucleus isn't quite as mature as the cytoplasm.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different things that could be going on here, but definitely following this dysplastic picture that we kind of expected to see. Totally not normal. Yeah.
Just another neutrophil.
Smudge.
Neutrophil. Is the neutrophil okay?
Yeah, just a neutrophil.
Yeah, and
it does look a little light, but
yeah. That may just be this patient's neutrophils too.
It could be, yep. Could be age of the slide too, right? I mean, you start to fade a little bit.
I think I'm gonna go a little bit thicker now. Then, no.
Definitely seeing that in ESO.
Yes. Look at this, like macro.
Huge.
And then you have some that are like,
teeny tiny. Yeah.
And then this neutrophil has some vacuoles in here.
It does, yep.
But otherwise, he looks pretty normal.
Yeah. And nothing alarming. Same.
Yep. The other thing with the neutrophils that we could see would be the hyposegmentation.
Right. Yes.
Pelgrifuit-ish anomaly. But this one, like this guy looks fine. He just has 4 segments, so. So let's move over here. I'm gonna try to move them in the middle.
The bilobes that's got really dark and a little weird.
He kind of looks like hyposegmentation.
Yep, that definitely, yep. And then kind of like a band ish immature cell on the right. I say bandish, not a band.
I was debating if it's a meta. I think it's a
meta. Yeah. The metas are much more, but just that you can see the chromatin difference there really well, which I like about that.
Yeah, between the two.
Good contrast there. But yeah, I'm looking at these cells and I'm like, I'm kind of hoping to see a hypogranular neutrophil, because these look a tad on the light side, but yeah. So
hypogranular is decreased granules, and then agranular would be no granules. And sometimes you see that in MDS also.
Yeah.
Agranular gets challenging, but
yeah.
So just 2 neutrophils.
2 neutrophils, yeah.
So another neutrophil, and
then So that looks like an NRBC, some kinds. What do you think?
I don't know, though. Yeah, I think so. I think
that's a bizarre one.
The cytoplasm looks like it's at the end stage of the polychromatophilic, but the nucleus looks way immature.
And so when Melissa said nuclear cytoplasmic asynchrony, that's this. And when I first look at it, a lot of times we want to talk about like IDing the cell, but really why this looks so weird to me is it's not making sense to itself.
Yeah.
Right? Like that nucleus and the cytoplasm just aren't, they're not lining up.
When it first came in, I was wondering if it was like a myelo.
Yeah, for real.
Like myelo, but then there's no granules.
Yep.
So it's one of those things where you're like, wait, what are you?
Yeah, but something's not quite right. So I think the main thing is as a working tech, as a student, when you come across things like this, it should give you pause, right? So what I really want to see a reaction of someone is that they stop and go, huh? But cool. I love that you talked about nuclear cytoplasmic asynchrony, and then we come across
a nice one.
A nice one. Yeah, a nice example of that. And then a red cell too, probably unexpected to find. Really, really neat.
Yeah, because a lot of people would try to force this into the neutrophilic lineage because that's what we've been mostly seeing. But it could happen in any lineage.
Absolutely. Yep. Super cool. Ah.
Hello, beautiful.
Yeah. So I see a very prominent nucleoli. I see a couple of smaller ones, maybe two other nucleoli.
There's one here, the big prominent one.
Yeah.
And then there's a little one here.
Yep.
And it almost looks like there's two right here. Like it's like this. And then like this. With like the places touching. Weird. So I'll clear it now so you can all look at it.
Also, I want to point out the red cell in the top right is like gigantic. But that's like, what?
He's probably bigger than this cell.
That's pretty wild. But yeah, we see high nuclear cytoplasm ratio, blue cytoplasm, although the staining in the cytoplasm is a little funky too, right? That's not not normal. But if you had to classify this, Melissa, what do you think you would call it?
He's a blast.
It is a blast. So notable. So we saw one pretty good blast. This one's a little bit of a weird blast, but definitely still best categorized as a blast.
And he's a little bit smaller.
He is smaller.
But the important thing to keep in mind when you're talking about the cells that still go through mitosis is that sometimes they're going to be really big and sometimes they're going to be medium-ish, because it depends if you're catching them right before they go through mitosis or right after they go through mitosis.
Excellent point. Relating the theory to the practice here. Yeah, it's a good point. And also with like malignant and dysplastic kind of things, like they do whatever. They'll just do weird stuff.
They do. They don't read textbooks, unfortunately.
No, they don't.
Sometimes it would be nice if they did.
Bilobing.
Yep.
Right. And then a weird bleb.
A weird
kind of coming off of.
Yeah. So this is that weird bleb here.
Yeah. It's unusual.
It is. It's unusual. Ooh.
So I think an immature gran next to this neutrophil here.
Yeah. So that's a neutrophil. This is one of our immature grans. So it's got a Golgi clearing. The granules look like they're evenly spread throughout. Did you say myelo?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I think it's a myelo also. And I think it's fine. Like, I don't think there's nuclear cytoplasmic asynchrony really here. I think this is just a myelo.
Yep, good point. Absolutely. Yep.
And it has the Golgi clearing, which not all myelos do in malignancies.
Yep. Yeah, true.
So that made it a little bit easier.
Yep.
Oh, and just for completeness, this is also a neutrophil.
Yes. Great. Blast number 3.
Blast number 3.
Another thing I kind of want to point out about this one too is like typical nuclei keep the contour, so the edges of it will be relatively like smooth and round. And this guy's got kind of a lumpy, bumpy nucleus.
Especially right here, where it's like, oh.
Yep. And you know, sometimes the cell just kind of gets jostled around and you look at it the right way and it can be a little off, but that's something that throws a red flag to me. This one has, you know, lots of different red flags to it, I guess.
Big, there's nucleoli.
Yep.
Soft.
Yep. Go down the list.
I know.
Nice blast though.
Look at this giant. Oh my god. I don't know if you heard me. I was moving and I went, whoa. So
yeah, that's a whoa, all right.
So big. Oh my God.
It's dramatic.
All right, let's go a little bit deeper.
Oh.
I was wondering if that was bridging, but I think it's just a
That's that's another textbook. I think one of our texts that we have there's a good picture of bridging on NRBC.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that would be more in the bone marrow.
Right. True. Yes. Right. Yeah. So like this particular patient, though they have MDS, we wouldn't be using their peripheral blood. Hey, normal mono. Though we have their peripheral blood, that's what we're looking at. We wouldn't use this diagnostically necessarily for staging or anything like that.
Another mono.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a mono.
Yep.
Here.
It looks like another myelo.
Yeah.
And it's got that. It's following the rules.
Yeah.
Get a little Golgi clearing.
Yeah, he is following the rules. Weird. It also depends on which lineages are impacted by the dysplasia. Because it could be one lineage, two lineages, or all the lineages. So it depends on which lineages are impacted. Another mono. Another mono here. And then he looks like a pyknotic neutrophil.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah. It's generally unusual to find pyknotic cells in a fresh blood. Yeah. You can see them as the blood gets to a day old. You might start to see some pyknotic cells pop up. But the pyknosis may or may not be related to the MDS.
Right. And with malignancy, it's a little bit more common to see pyknotic cells in the peripheral blood because the cells usually have their apoptotic function shut off. So they're usually going to go through some kind of necrotic process. This is just a neutrophil looking guy.
And it looks like the number 3.
He did. Oh, so there's this guy here.
Okay.
I think he's still a myelo.
Me too.
I don't think he's a meta yet, but he has no Golgi.
Right.
Okay, so they don't have to.
Probably moving along to being a meta, right? Like soon-ish, or.
Well, it may be, and it could be just the nucleus and the cytoplasm aren't in sync because if you look, the cytoplasm is half pink and half blue.
True.
So the cytoplasm is youngish.
Right. That should suggest it being youngish. That's right. Yep.
And I want to back up just a bit for the hem.
Is it a lymph?
It's a lymph. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring the lymph in because we haven't seen one really.
Come on in, lymphs.
And we've seen the blast, so I wanted to compare the blast and the lymph.
Absolutely. It's a good point. Comparison.
So, you can see there's a lot of these white striations in the nucleus here. There's a lot of deep dark purple areas. There's really no prominent nucleoli. The cytoplasm doesn't have the same blue color to it that the blast does. It's just a completely different looking cell.
Yep.
Another lymph now that I found the other guy. See them? Oh, I just pulled them out. Just 2 neutrophils.
Just 2 neutrophils hanging out. Ooh, another blast.
A blast. This one's small.
Yeah, it is small. Yep. And it's got some areas of the nucleus that are kind of dark too. So we kind of, again, malignant cells can have different staining properties and just weird characteristics that are unusual. But most other attributes of the cell tell me it's a blast.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think it's particularly.
It's even weird doing these blebby things. Weird.
Yeah, not normal.
A lot of times the actual identification of it being a blast is going to come from flow cytometry anyway. So we just have to identify that the cell is abnormal and then say, it looks blasty, hand it off to the pathologist who's going to, they're going to get flow and then they'll kind of confirm. So
it's really true. I think, we're in such a different place than we were 20 or 30 years ago with terms of diagnostics and leukemias. Really what we want is to be able to catch disease. Looks like a lymphocyte. Yeah.
The lymph, but he's got a prominent nucleoli. So I wanted to show him.
He does.
Right here.
But otherwise, like clumps and he
looks lymphy.
Lymph.
Yeah, lymphs have nucleoli. We just don't normally see them because of the way they're small, round, and resting. We see them on body fluids because you smash them against the glass so they spread out and show you their nucleoli.
So true. But yeah, diagnostically, it's important for the bench tech to recognize that that this needs flow, recognize that this needs pathologist attention. Another immature gran looks like pinched in a bit, right? It's hard for me to see exactly how far pinched in, but it looks like an easy medical, I guess.
I think I would call him a meta too.
Yeah. Ooh, cool.
Beautiful.
It is beautiful. I love the darker blue up at the top of the cell there. So yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's just a myelo.
Yeah, myelo. Yeah.
He almost looks like beautiful, like easy to pick out kind of myelo too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Very pretty.
So this guy here is a mono.
Yes, agreed.
And this guy here is not a mono.
So cool. So, and this has got an exaggerated nucleoli that has like this pointed edge to it, really, really unusual. Yeah.
Almost like a triangle.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it almost looks like in this corner here that there's like a nucleoli, but with another nucleoli with like another one where they're like piled on top of each other.
Now that you pointed it out, I see that. And what makes it stand out is when you see these nucleoli, you get a darker kind of an outline from the chromatin. I can see that better now. Yeah. But another blast. So we've had a fair amount of blasts on this slide.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to think it's not one of like the relatively benign, MDSs. It's probably one of the more excess blasts subcategories of MDS.
Yeah. Yeah, if this is in the peripheral blood, what is the marrow looking like?
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Yeah, so MDS can have different presentations. Most of the time, it's older individuals presenting with MDS. So depending on the severity and the aggressiveness of it, one could live with MDS for the duration of their life otherwise, right? Like,
for example, 5q- syndrome is like probably the best prognosis because they don't usually progress to having like an AML or anything, and you can live for a long time with the 5q- syndrome usually. But then there are some other ones, with having multilineage dysplasia that are more aggressive or excess blasts that are more aggressive. So it really does depend on the subtype of MDS. And it looks like a wonky lymph.
It does. I agree with you. It does. And of course, there's so many other things involved in the health status of a patient, right? Like other challenges.
Of course. Well, and that's the other thing is what other comorbidities do they have? So why don't we take this swoop and focus on the red cells.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I've been ignoring the red cells.
Unless they're massive and they're like, whoa.
Right. So center field is a little bit of a target, like an ovello target cell, which looks kind of cool.
This guy?
Yeah.
That's a platelet.
Oh, is it a platelet on there?
Yeah.
Oh, my bad.
That's a platelet on a red cell.
Oh, my bad.
He is ovallo though.
Yes. So I see like slight crenation that's been kind of in and about the fields.
Burr.
Mm-hmm. A mild ovelocytosis.
Yep. And like these guys here, they're almost elliptocytic. They're so ovallocytic.
Yeah, I'm kind of like lumping them into the yeah.
There's definitely ovallocytes.
Mm-hmm.
But then the question would be, are there elliptocytes? And I think this guy's really the only like elliptocyte here. So there's definitely more ovallocytes.
Mm-hmm.
There's even like this guy looks like a spherocyte.
Yes. I think there's been a couple of those. I'm not sure about
Here?
if we would call them necessarily, but
I guess we'll see.
they're
There's
around.
another one here.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe.
And then I'm seeing some cells that have like the, kind of Pac-Man, either flat edges or disruptions to its cytoplasm.
Kind of like a helmet cell.
Helmet cells. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, there's a couple of those in there too. Okay, so we'll kind of keep all of that in mind as we move on.
And I've also been trying to peek at the platelets a bit, and they're not as numerous as I would like them to be, but I haven't seen them look particularly bad either. So sometimes you'll see some really funky platelet morphologies.
Yeah, and maybe it's the dysplasia is more in the megakaryocytes than in the platelets. It could be that too.
So I see another like helmet cell up in the corner there. Make a note of. Another spherocyte kind of.
Spherocytes. There's a good.
Maybe I've just been ignoring them because now that I'm seeing.
I think there are enough spherocytes in these things.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Yeah, so
and
I think
then mild ovelocytes.
Yeah, and then there's some ovallocytes. Yeah. But that's why I went in even deeper to see if there really are spherocytes.
The aniso is definitely stark, huh? Like,
get this little guy here compared to this giant guy here. I don't know that I would call micro or macro cytosis, but there's definitely anisocytosis. The RDW would be elevated. Okay, so there's some crenation, but it's really like this guy's here is like really mild crenation, so I don't know that I'd call them crenated. Some ovallocytes again, and then some spherocytes. Yeah.
Another helmety schistoey kind of fella on the periphery on the left. Yeah, there too. Yep.
This guy over here. I don't know if there's enough helmet cells to call.
Depends, right?
So far. But spheros and ovallos. This one looks like it's got adequate platelets.
Yeah.
All right, some ovallos in here.
I'm kind of like an ovallocytes, spherocytes. And I think it depends on it always depends on the SOP, the place that you're doing this at. But there's some low grade crenation and rare schistocyte helmet cells, whatever.
Yeah.
Best fits. Is that a platelet with no granules?
Right here.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like there's another one right there.
Mm.
So some agranular platelets.
Mm-hmm.
Which, with the number of blasts, a trilineage dysplasia makes more sense.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so I think we'd call 1 plus sphero, 1 plus ovalo.
Mhm.
That would be it for the calling.
Yep.
And then we did see some helmet cells, like there's a helmet cell here, right here.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said, some crenation, but not enough to call on either. Definitely an ESO.
Definitely an ESO.
But it depends on the institution, because some institutions don't call an ESO.
Right. Yeah. So some of these things, in my personal opinion, are best left to the indices to kind of tell the stories, you know. An ESO would probably be one of them.
Yeah.
I think.
Yep, between the RDW and the MCV.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Tell a good story there. But
Cool.
This slide was interesting between the nuclear to cytoplasmic asynchrony we saw in a couple cells, to the number of blasts that we saw, to the strange RBC morphology. I think this was a good representation of what an MDS would look like.
Absolutely. I'm pleasantly surprised, if I might say, because sometimes we don't really know what we're going to get exactly on the slide, but this is cool. It's a good opportunity.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all we have in this video. So thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you'd like notifications whenever we post a new video. And feel free to reach out to us on social media or via email with comments or suggestions about future content. Thanks.